David, thank you for coming on the Leadership Lounge. Basically, yeah, the structure of this is I think you have a really, really unique story about just how you're just singularly minded on what you're trying to accomplish, like with your career, and of eventually making a feature-length film, and directing that, and writing that. So I think just kind of hearing about your journey, and then obviously you own a business too, and kind of your leadership style and who you learned that from. So kind of where did your interest in, because it's like, a lot of people love movies, but everyone's like, I want to make a movie.
Mm-hmm.
So where did that kind of start for you?
Yeah, because people aren't crazy. That's
yeah, exactly. Well, you're finding that out
now. Yeah, so I grew up watching a lot of old movies. My parents loved television from the 60s, Dick Van Dyke, Andy Griffith. And I also grew up on tons of Westerns, like John Wayne, and older comedy, Three Stooges, Marx Brothers. We didn't really watch much silent stuff. I didn't do that until college, but I love Chaplin, so it's worth saying in the same breath as Marx Brothers. But so I think I only bring that up because I think that exposure to older films and their style, their simplicity, there wasn't all of the kind of glitz and glamour and I don't know, just all the CGI and everything like that you get today, the high-paced action and editing. It was much more like seeing a stage production with a camera rolling. Yeah. And obviously, if anybody's film buffs out there, and I know that there were great films at the time using techniques that we still use today, but I think for the most part, it was a lot of stationary camera, let the actors do their lines and just be in the moment, and long takes and stuff like that. And that's just a different viewing experience than what people are used to today. And because of that, I think as I started to get older, I really fell in love with film because I had this base of what watching a movie was in my mind. And then as I added to that more modern tendencies, modern techniques, just kind of all of the things that film is today as far as the grandiose stories and the way that they're edited and shot, I started to really fall in love with the craft because of that. But before that whole transition took place, because a lot of that was in high school as I started to watch more R-rated movies, a lot of the movies that are more prestigious, winning awards, and just made by really, really talented filmmakers are a little bit, usually PG-13 or rated R. And when I was a kid, obviously, those weren't movies that I was watching. And so that's kind of the up until the end of high school path of what my love of film looked like. But then for this, like you're saying, crazy idea of like, well, who grows up and wants to actually make movies? When I was in middle school, I found on my computer that you could use Windows Movie Maker. I don't know if you ever messed around with that.
No.
But it was the first time where I put it together in my head that someone was making the movie, as silly as that might sound, because it's something I tell my kids all the time now because I'm used to that. That's the world I live in. And but I think when you're a kid, you just think a movie's like a piece of magic and it just exists and you watch it and you don't think about that anyone could actually do it. And so got my hands on Windows Movie Maker. We had some old DV recorder cameras, and so I'd go out with friends. I'd make up stories that we could film, usually just comedy things that would be funny. And it was interesting because over time of making these with some of my close friends, my brother would do it with me a lot too. I was always like, why am I always the only one who wants to like come up with these stories? Come on, guys. And I just thought everybody was kind of being like lazy, when it was like, no, it's because I had this base love of like taking a video camera or film camera or anything like that and putting a story together and making it funny or making it, having it do some sort of technique that I saw in film, and just starting to realize that was actually a possibility. And then some time went by and I didn't think too much about that anymore, of like, I'm going to go do that someday. But then at school, in high school, as I was going into my junior year, and you had this as well, but there was vocational school to be able to learn kind of trades, which I think maybe traditionally has been for more
Yeah.
Mechanical, there's nursing and
Yeah,
stuff
like
like
not
that.
really technology based, more like
Right.
mechanics, machining,
Mhm.
building trades, stuff like that. But
Right. So, but for us, there was a video production one, and it kind of clicked in my head. I love doing this. I've been doing it just because I enjoy it. I could actually do this for a career.
yeah.
And I think I always knew I wanted to do something creative because, and this is just another funny thing that I would want to do as a kid because, I don't know, video games are kind of seen as like a more lazy and kiddish thing to do. But
Yeah.
I always thought, well, maybe one thing I want to do is I want to create video games. So it's very similar
Yeah,
to
I think,
to what a filmmaking is. It's still storytelling and it's entertainment. And but yeah, I just remember that they had a meeting about the options that the Career Center had, and I right away was just like, that's what I want to do with my life.
Yeah, it was definitely like a weird. I feel like it accelerated pretty quickly. So, like, one question I would ask you is: do you have a memory watching a movie where you were initially like blown away? Like, wow, I just watched the best movie I've ever seen.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, again, it's funny looking back at these different moments that I'm telling you now. Windows Movie Maker, making movies with my friends, having this deep impact from different movies over time, even before that into elementary, having the Career Center people come. Yeah. But there was an additional time that was even before that where I didn't think, okay, I have to make movies, but it was where I felt for the first time, this is the greatest medium form of entertainment that exists, in my opinion. And that was when I first watched the Lord of the Rings, the Fellowship of the Ring.
Oh, that's hilarious because that was my memory I was going to share. I remember coming back from camp. This was, I think I was 11 or 12.
Mm-hmm.
I remember my parents had bought it on VHS, and I remember watching it because like my parents didn't like typically let me watch a lot of like movies by myself.
PG-13. Yeah, big deal.
And I remember like watching it, and like my eyes must have been huge. Watching it, like, what did I just experience?
Yeah,
because it was like kind of fantasy, but then it was also like pretty dark and gory too. So it was like getting to experience that for the first time. Like, I think I just watched the best movie ever made, and I think the critics have said it did.
And you did watch it. Yeah. Well, yeah. For me, and it was that old VHS, same thing, but it was like the two, because it's such a long movie. You had to take it out and put the other one in. But I was at a friend's house, and we had this, we call it Shark Club, which was this crawl space where we just had like a TV and other stuff. We'd hang out there and everything like that. And we watched it through, and I was kind of sneaking because I don't think I was allowed to watch PG-13 at the time. Yeah. So there was this additional element of like,
well, we weren't 13 yet, so we weren't allowed to.
Exactly. Yeah. We weren't 13. And we finished it. My friend and I finished it, and I was like, let's watch that again. And we watched the whole thing again. So we spent 6 hours in a row just watching Lord of the Rings, The Fellowship. And then, obviously, the next year, the next one came out. And then the year after that, Return of the King came out. And those are still my favorite movies today. So that was, I guess, the movie that I would be like, that cemented my love of what a film could be. And kind of brought me into that. Again, we're joking about PG-13 and R, but most of the great filmmakers weren't spending their time making G and PG movies. Those are mostly for kids. And so coming into that world of just that whole additional talent and technique that you were never able to see.
Yeah, maybe only 5 to 10% of the movies in the IMDb top 250 would be under PG-13.
Maybe. I mean, a lot of Pixar ones score really well, but yeah.
But even Pixar, even to that point, they weren't. A lot of them came out even after that point too. The ones that would have been on there.
Yeah.
So you vocational, and this was kind of a transformative time for a lot of us because a lot of us were going through this period of time where we're figuring out what we really enjoyed and maybe even what we want to do in the future. What about that, number one, maybe helped spark either that interest or made it where it was like, this is something that could be done by you? Like, what was that like?
In the class, you're saying? I think that I very quickly realized that it was something that I excelled at. I was going based on a very small sample size as far as just students in Northwest Indiana who were interested in it, but I not only felt like I exhibited some natural talent in filmmaking, when I was comparing myself to others, which is all I had the ability to do. But I also could tell that I really loved it. When most of the class was like, oh, okay, this is kind of cool, and I'll do the assignments, it was like, once I started that class, that's what I spent my free time doing, is just making productions. And then as I went on, kind of, we had like our statewide competition, which I won with the short film that myself and a couple other friends did for that. And I was able to see, okay, this is something that I think I'm talented at a higher level than just maybe something that could never become a career.
Yeah.
So that is all to say, or that is not to say that the success that I experienced in that, and we'll talk about college a little bit here too, shows that I would then be successful in filmmaking, because that's something I'm still in the midst of trying to do. But it did mean and gave me complete confidence that somewhere in the media and the video field, I could make a career, find a career, make a career for myself.
Yeah, and I think you were surrounded by a lot of willing participants to be in your stuff too. Like people who are like passionate, maybe not as passionate about the movie stuff, but like, we had multiple friends who were like really heavily into music and wanted to be musicians and actors and like.
Well, we have a whole group of friends that many of us are entrepreneurs of some sort.
Yeah.
And there's a creativity with that. There's construction, you're building something, and it takes something from inside you, not what you might get from a boss or a teacher, to say, hey, I need you to do this. I need you to do this. Yeah. For a lot of us, it's been like, I want to do this. I want to create this. I want to build this company. I want to see if I can find success here, or, do this beautiful woodworking project and create furniture like our other friend does. And then I even have friends, we have friends from that same class that I took who did cinematography, and as we'll get into my company I own with another friend of ours who even went back to that vocational school even with me, and then we all went to college together.
So you get done with the vocational in high school, you end up choosing to go to Ball State. I feel like that was really when it kind of started getting more solidified and to what you want to do. So talk a little bit about like that journey, and then kind of what you learned, and then I want to talk a little bit about, did you feel like you got your money's worth out of a college education?
Yeah, for sure. So I went to Ball State because our teacher in the vocational school, he had gone to Ball State and he spoke really highly of it. And I think for the path that he had taken, which was in news, it was top notch, one of the best in the country. I spent all my time in the David Letterman building, which was obviously donated millions and millions of dollars by David Letterman to create this state-of-the-art place for students to learn to do video production, but it was mainly for learning to do high-quality news work. And so a lot of people, though, went to Ball State for filmmaking, but they didn't have the resources that a film school would have had. Even though there were some great professors who taught things like film history and genres, I had one professor in particular who did teach more of a filmmaking emphasis. He had come from a little bit more of a documentary background, but still I was able to focus on just the filmmaking aspect there. But in general, as far as college goes, it wasn't film school by any means, even though it was sort of talked about in that way. But what I was going to say is, because there were so many people there who thought that, I have a big network of friends from college that all went there to do film, and so a lot of them have now still ended up finding success in the film industry.
Yeah, I feel like if you were to look at it more of what you really got out of that program, it didn't come from the professors. It didn't come from even the equipment they let you borrow, because most of the equipment was like so old and outdated. It came from a bunch of people coming like, let's make movies. And it was like, well, they're not going to like provide us with much. We just have to get together. And it was like every weekend you guys were making some commercial, or you were making some video or working on something together.
Right. And like I said, I don't want to I did have good professors there,
Yeah.
but it wasn't the emphasis that I thought that was going to be there. I thought there'd be a big group of professors who all really loved filmmaking and were going to teach about cinematography and all these things. And that just wasn't the emphasis by any means. But yeah, it really was, I'd get an assignment in video production 1, and it was really only for like a 2-minute video that could have taken a day to make, and I'd write something and we'd take several weeks to create it just for the sake of making something awesome. And it didn't really matter to me about the grades, and the grades came because of that. But
yeah, because I feel like, so I can kind of speak to this because my wife went through the same program,
Mhm.
like kind of with you, and
Mhm.
just kind of being like, basically your group of friends that went through the program, really almost all of them from Valpo,
Mhm.
like all of our friend group, it was like the quality you guys were putting out. It was like, you were like known as like, oh, like it's like, this is like, there was like your normal like bell curve, and then you guys were like all the
Mhm.
way at the other end with like the
Mhm.
quality because you were passionate about it. It wasn't like, oh, I'm gonna get an
Right.
A in this class. It's like, that doesn't matter to me.
Yeah.
I want to make the best quality stuff because like what you're pursuing is kind of even outside of
Yeah.
what was even being offered.
Yeah, and there were pods like that. I mean, I had kind of my crew, not that it was my crew, but the crew of us that did filmmaking together. I have another friend, Kenny Stevenson, who's also a business owner now, and his company does great work. And he had a pod of a crew that they all made stuff together. He and Andrew, and who else? Patrick Ball, who I'm doing stuff with now. He had a group of people that he would make films with, and there were others. So if any people from Ball State are watching this, and I didn't think to mention you, I know that there was a lot of talented people there that were, like I said, in these pods. And so, but yes, the average person in the program wasn't spending a ton of time trying to make great quality. There were just these pods of people who were. So.
Yeah. So in college, I want to talk a little bit about a couple of the projects that you worked on. I know you did the 24-hour film festival for Chicago. You obviously won that. It's a huge accomplishment. And then I particularly have a memory of like, I don't know how long it was, but you had like a full production done, and I forget what the name of it was that you did. But I mean, there was probably like 70 people involved in getting that done.
Yeah, are you talking about the boxing film, which you were in for a little bit? You were one of the boxers.
I was in much better shape back then. But
yeah, you're kind of like a background boxer or whatever. That was cool. So what was the question about that?
I guess more of like doing that like process, that kind of like help you understand what it took to actually make like a feature, like in a small way, like what it would take to make a feature-length film and kind of the stresses behind that, doing that project.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, every project did up to that point. That was just the longest one that I had done up to then. It ended up being about a half hour long. And yeah, I mean, it involved, a crew of 15 to 20 people. We had that one day where there was extras there, and we probably had 35 either extras and talent on set. And so I just wanted to build into something bigger with everything that I did, give myself more experience. And so, yeah, I think it was helpful, and it didn't necessarily it didn't feel like something that was particularly different at the time from the other stuff I was working on.
Yeah.
It just felt like the next thing that happened to take more work and to be at a bigger scope.
Yeah.
But I did learn a ton on it from working with so many people, and that was a long time ago now. But
yeah, I know even a lot of those people who helped you with that, you've stayed in contact with them to help you kind of with the project you're working on now. So, graduate college, you didn't go into film right away. Can you talk a little bit about your decision to kind of go into what you did right after college, and then your decision to move out of that?
Yeah, so it's very spiritual for me
Yeah.
as far as what that whole process was. When I was in college, as you know, my faith in Jesus became something that was real, and I made a a very significant decision to follow him and to make my life not about me anymore, but about him. And so in the Christian faith, we talk a lot about idols and having idols in our lives, things that we put above God. And for me, I started to realize that film had become that. And not just film, but this whole idea of creating feature films, sort of ascending to this next level of not necessarily fame, like I think I was going to be famous or anything like that, but just societally something that's maybe viewed on a pedestal.
Yeah.
And so kind of all that wrapped up in my heart of feeling like that was so important. And I think because that was a very real thing going on inside of me, I felt strongly at one point where I was in prayer that God wanted me to move into something else. And so at the time I was involved in a Christian organization, and so I decided to go on staff with that organization, which was a college ministry.
Yep.
And so I did that for 2 years. As I was making the decision to go into that, I started dating my current wife, Julia, and so she and I went on staff together. We got married that first year, and then did that for 2 years. So I was on Ball State's campus for 2 more years after graduating, too.
Yeah, alongside of obviously serving the Lord and doing that, I was a part of that organization, too, in college. What did you learn kind of from a leadership standpoint through that really kind of helped you kind of go into doing your own thing after?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, this is a great question. It kind of is something that I've thought a lot about since then. Mm-hmm. And as I've looked back on my life, this is hilarious since this is the name of your podcast, but as I've thought about how God made me, I think that at every point he has put my inclinations toward leadership. In whatever role it is that I'm doing, whether it's leading a company, whether it's trying to make a film, making films as kids and wanting to make that happen, with my church right now, as well as the organization I was in college, it felt natural to me to take on leadership roles, leading a small group, leading, in Christian organizations, there's all kinds of groups, and leading them, doing talks up front, leading the music is something I did too. I can play guitar very poorly, but well enough that in a small organization,
enough to look cool.
Lead.
Yeah, for
sure. Look cool to people who don't know at all.
Yeah.
So I think then my time with the Navigators was the organization, getting to exercise a lot of that leadership, being able to lead in one-on-one situations where people were looking for mentorship, as well as things like having to prepare for lessons, to prepare to speak to a big group of people, just getting used to that, being in front of people, talking about very serious things that involve the deepest part of people's lives. I think all of that has set me up when I moved into, let's call it the professional world instead of the ministry world, even though they're both professions. But I think it set me up for, honestly, conversations that are not as difficult and interactions that are not as hard to have. I'm not necessarily worried that I'm going to go in and find out some deep, dark secret about someone that we've got to work through or point them in the direction of even deeper counseling or anything like that. So that was certainly formative for what I would end up doing in the future and what I continue to do now and will continue to do.
Yeah, I think when I think back to that time in college and being part of that organization, and I think back to something very important that was emphasized and that I learned about was ministering to the soul, and specifically talking with people and asking questions that in a genuine way that make people feel cared for and that they can trust you to talk about what's really going on with them. Mm-hmm. I think that's it's a hard thing to know how to do. Mm-hmm. I think that's one thing that was really taught. Like, hey, we want to get to really know people so we can be genuine with each other. Mm-hmm. I think that was one of the most important things, because when you own a business, it's the simple thing of you walk in and you can tell someone's not doing okay. I think that just that ability, and I'd be like, hey, are you doing okay? And then they're like, yeah, I'm fine. And they're like, oh, like how are these things going in your life? And then quickly, you know, a lot of times people will open up when they feel like, hey, this person cares for me. And I feel like that specifically has been one of the most important things I've learned in my journey. Just like being able to number one, be able to tell, but then number two, be able to really lean in on people and really get to know them and let them feel like, hey, I can talk with this person about those things.
Yeah. You know, and as we'll get into talking about my company, you know, I want to sit here and be like, oh, I've always tried to love people really well, love the people who've worked for me really well. And that's always been important to me. The people who have worked for us have been really important, but I've definitely made mistakes and things that I would have done differently that maybe didn't care for people as well as I would have wanted to. Not that I made any decisions that were intentionally like, I don't care about this person, but I think I've even more recently in the company as we've had different struggles and then had to bounce back and our company's doing well, but just seeing what does it look like to love people in a professional setting and to care for the people that you've been entrusted to, which for us, for people who own companies, employees are one of those people who there's some level of influence or just power that you have, being able to, you know, how much would I like to give this person a raise? How much am I able to give them a raise? Or what's the workload that I'm putting on this person? And then for us, you know, something that we did poorly is how do I manage this person, this organization, and make sure that they're doing well and that everything that could be done is being done to help them excel. I think that's definitely the area that we have failed in and are trying to continually improve in now.
Yeah, so you get out of college, you get a degree, you go and work for a Christian organization, essentially kind of in a ministry position like a missionary. And then you take it one step further, be like, I'm gonna really roll the dice and start my own business. You know, can you talk a little bit about that decision, what that was like for you and your wife to talk about that, and move away from your home, and then who you decided to open up a business with, why?
Yeah, so that kind of continues the story as far as the spiritual aspect of it is when I was doing ministry. We spent a lot of time with freshman students, just me and my wife in particular. There were other members on staff, and we were spending a lot of time with freshman students. And Julia was standing in the kitchen at one point, and she asked me, hey, so do you want to do this again next year? Like, do you want to keep working with the navigators? And honestly, I had not even really thought about not doing it. I think just because that spiritual event that I had where I felt like God was like, give up on this. And so in my mind, I was like, oh, okay, so I guess I'm doing ministry. That's my career now.
Yeah.
But when she said it, I immediately felt this sense of total disquietude, let's call it, of uncertainty, I guess, about what the future was going to look like. And one of the main reasons for that is I realized that I don't feel any sort of calling or even a natural inclination toward working with younger people.
Yeah.
Not that I wouldn't hire anyone younger, but as far as just like spending all of my time in meetings with, listening to the problems of, you know, it sounds bad, but of younger people. There's certain people who excel in that, people who lead youth groups and people who do college ministry, and I just started to really feel like I'm not that person. I'm being drained more than usual by all of these meetings that I'm having. Particularly at the time that I was meeting with freshmen and trying to form these new relationships was really tough. So any of my friends out there who were in the Navigators, you weren't freshmen at the time, probably.
Yeah. Saved it.
Yeah. So because of that, I started to think, okay, well, if we didn't continue working with the Navigators, then what are we going to do? And so I looked at my career or my degree, and was like, okay, well, I could do something in video because I still felt this like I've been called away from doing filmmaking because that was an idol in my heart. But over the coming months, I started to feel the sense of that idol that was an idol in your heart over me, if this is God talking, is not an idol anymore.
Yeah.
And so feel freedom to pursue it. And I still feel that today. I mean, that was over 10 years ago, and I still feel this. It was around 10 years ago. This strong sense of, I want to do film, but it's not my God by any means.
But
I have 10 things more important.
I
than
feel like that makes a lot of sense too, because that was like your not saying that was your full identity, but I would say if people were like, "Oh, David's the guy who makes like really good video," and like kind of everyone had this expectation that you would be the one that would go off and have some sort of success in like some place like Hollywood or something, and maybe that expectation of like, "Oh, I'm getting ready to graduate," people have this expectation. There is like that sense that
I
weight
think
was put on.
To a lot of people, it was weird that I didn't go on and do film. So, yeah, but I didn't think much about that.
But even for me, I feel like the expectation for me to do certain things, there was this sense of like pride behind that of like, this is what people expect of me and this is what people think of me. And probably like kind of when you step away from that, you don't do it, that it's like, it's no longer like that expectation from others has dropped. And then it's, what the Lord is expecting of you.
Yeah, and I think, even if you're not religious, having times of intentional meditation where you're actually thinking about your life and what's good and, why am I doing this? You might still realize, oh, I'm just doing this because it's what people expect of me.
Yeah.
I don't even like this anymore. For me, it's different as a believer because it's like, why am I doing this? And why do I do anything? I should be doing things because I want to give glory to the Lord. I want to serve others. I want to give to the poor, all these different kinds of things that are important to Jesus. So yeah, I could see someone who's not religious still having a similar experience of like, oh, I'm just doing this for this or that reason. But most people just kind of, and I do this a lot of times in my life too, at various times, but it seems like most people just kind of go about their life and they don't take the time to just sit back and really self-evaluate. Why am I doing anything?
Yeah.
I think that's a big deal that you need to do, especially if you're going to be a leader and trying to think about starting companies and stuff like that.
So you're not sure if you want to go back. You're looking at your heart. You feel like this thing that was maybe an idol of yours is gone or has been dulled to where you feel movement to pursue it. What was the decision to go into the company you have now, and then what was it like calling the boys in to do it with you?
Yeah. So kind of the end of that decision-making process, I was reading a lot at the time. I read this book called So What's Your Point? And it had a lot to do with story, the importance of story. What's the story that we're in as human beings? And I just had this rekindling of the flame of love for story and storytelling, and eventually, I don't remember what the final kind of thing was, but we had to make a decision, and we decided, yes, let's not continue on staff with the Navigators. So then it was like, okay, well, what exactly are we going to do? Yeah. And I had friends in Arizona, New York, people who were in Valparaiso, all who were doing media of some sort. And so Julia and I talked a lot about, like, should we move somewhere? And ended up deciding that we would like to be in Chicago. It's close to family. And if I would have known what it was going to be like to have kids before that decision, I would have never thought about going anywhere else except for somewhere that's closer to family. So I called one of our friends, Tyler Grandholm, who's still my business partner, and asked him about if he wanted to start a company with me. And what we wanted to do, and maybe this is the unique aspect that you talked about earlier, is we both knew we'd like to do filmmaking.
Yeah.
but we also want to have families. And so how do we go about this journey in a way that's not the typical starving artist? Move out to LA without any money and get the lowest level position you can and just work your way up.
Yeah.
We wanted to, be able to provide in some sort of way for our families. And I mean, Julia was providing basically full time for our family at the time. But we wanted to be able to, have kids and have time with them and not be a slave to all of the working your way up that you have to be. And I'm still in this journey, and this plan is yet to be fully realized. Everything's going well now. We'll talk about that in a little bit, but it was our goal from the beginning to secure all of those things while also getting to move into film. And so what we came up with was that we wanted to use our skills in video production that we had. Both he and I had gone to school together to do film and to vocational. Even in high school, we'd been doing stuff together for a long time. And we knew some other people peripherally who were doing media companies of different sorts. One of them was Wade Brightsky, who owns We Create. I think he might still own 27. I'm not sure.
Yeah, I think so.
And they were doing wedding videos, and I saw those as something that I definitely had the ability to be able to do and to do well, and knew that they had had some success. But we also didn't want to just limit ourselves to weddings. We wanted to see, maybe moving into the corporate or commercial side that would provide us with connections that when we wanted to dive into narrative filmmaking, that would benefit us. And so we kind of came up with this plan of we're going to try to create a company that provides us with the amount of money we need to survive and the amount of time that we need to take time off to work on filmmaking stuff. Yeah. And we didn't know what that was going to look like at the time. What we thought is we'll be able to advance in wedding video quality so much that we'll be able to make enough money during the summers that we can actually use our winters and early spring to just work on filmmaking stuff. Yeah. That was our plan at the time. We didn't know that what was going to happen and what it was going to evolve into was going to be something even more beneficial toward film than that. But that was the goal at the time, and we felt like, okay, well, we probably need one more person to be able to do this. And so we asked Brandon Mattingly, who also went to school and to high school with us, went through all those same programs with us, if he wanted to leave his job. He was working at Roots. His family had started an organic juice cafe, and so he was working with them there, and called him, and he said, I'd like to do that as well. And he was, I think, engaged at the time too, so he was getting married, and he had the same priorities and desires. And so for Brandon, I don't think it was as strongly as it was for Tyler and I, this desire to do narrative filmmaking. Yeah. Brandon just loves video of all kinds and being creative and getting to use those skills to create something beautiful and artistic and profitable as well. Yeah. Because he's got a great business mind too. But so the three of us, then we decided to do that. After the school year ended, we moved to Chicago, and each of us got an apartment there, and we started doing weddings, word of mouth. We did a lot for free. My wife is a nurse, so she worked while I was making $0.
Yeah, Tyler was driving for Uber.
Well, there was times in our company, that he had to do that, and his wife had provided for him, I think, some too, while we weren't making very much money, and Brandon's wife got a job, so it's kind of we all were kind of starving artists there at the beginning, just with providers for us.
It's funny because when we would talk about, because I had started my business before you guys did while I was still in college, and my experience was much more different because me and my wife worked together in the actual business, and then we got pregnant right after we got married.
Mm-hmm.
So it was like kind of feast or famine, and I just remember being so unbelievably stressed and anxious like all the time.
Yeah.
Really, even for years. And then you tell it's like, oh, it's great, it's fun. Like, and I'm just like, oh, it was not my experience, because it wasn't like, if we don't have a job. Yeah. Yeah. I remember I like calculated how much I was making per hour. And I think I was making like $8 an hour or something. I was working like 60 hours a week.
Yeah. It was good. The living costs were low.
Yeah. Yeah. That's true. So one actually curious thing and something I didn't really know the intricacies. How was that for you starting a business with two of your best friends? You guys, I mean, did you just all get along perfectly, or like what were some areas where it's like, I think that we should prioritize this, and I think I should prioritize this, and then how'd you work through that?
Yeah. So surprisingly, yes, we did get along perfectly. Really well. I mean, we had been friends for so long, and both of those guys are humble, and we all love each other, and I think we're all quick to forgive. We're not easily offended, and so it has made for a really, really great working environment between the three of us. It did make, and we'll get to how the company has changed, but especially at the beginning, it made for we had a lot of fun. A lot of fun, and we liked working together in the office. We liked working together at the weddings, which is the majority of what we did in the first couple of years. So yeah, I have no helpful information about how to get along with.
Yeah, because I remember being like, oh, do you guys have like an operating agreement? And they're like, no. And I'm just like,
we did. We created an operating agreement. We created articles of organization and all that kind of stuff that you have to do. So we did our due diligence, but it was very much never a significant issue.
Okay. So start the business, starting weddings. You guys are obviously working a majority of that yourselves. Like at what point, was it just slowly? You guys slowly got to work your way out where you weren't like shooting the actual weddings, or did you feel like there was like a switch where it was pretty quick where it's like, oh, like how was the acceleration of your guys' growth in that kind of sense?
Yeah, so the big thing that changed our company really is that we had talked with a acquaintance of ours who was also a wedding videographer who told us that we needed to advertise on the big wedding websites. So right now that's The Knot and the Wedding Wire, actually both owned by the same company.
Oh, wow.
And it was a tough decision because when you're in the beginning of your company, the idea of spending money on advertising is really scary.
Yeah.
And a lot of advertising is really bad. We get emails all the time from people being like, advertise with us. And we've tried various ones over the years as we've had more, capital to be able to risk advertising investments not working out. But so we made the decision to advertise with Wedding Wire was, I think, who we ended up doing first at the time. And right away, we started booking weddings. The first year when we started the company, we had shot, I believe, 7 weddings. I think 2 or 3 of them we did for free.
Yeah.
And all of them we did for cheap. And then the next year, we shot 37 weddings.
Yeah.
And so because we saw so much growth as far as people trying to book us, and because there's a limited number of weekends, we realized pretty quickly, okay, we can either raise our prices really high or we can try to do more than a wedding in a day.
Yeah.
And so that decision is what led us to kind of ended up where we are today. Mm-hmm. But what it meant is that we needed to hire either employees or contractors. And so that first year, what we decided was to hire employees, full-time employees. So our first hire, his name's Tin, and he just is incredible. Such a good hire. He's a great friend now. Yeah. So fun, so professional, so fashionable. He's just an all-around great hire, especially for shooting weddings and doing film and everything like that. And he's talented and really creative. And so we got him on board. We got another employee later that month named Dom, also super talented and really fun to be around. And so we had a good team going, and we trained them to shoot in our style and edit in our style. And then we grew from there. The next year we did 55 weddings, and we had to hire again, I believe. Yeah. And so, well, I'll kind of let you ask a question of what was next. I could just give you the whole, story of our company.
Yeah, getting like more concise stuff where people like helpful. I think one thing I really respected about you guys is you guys were very, and this is probably more Tyler's skill set too. You guys were very like, this will work and we're going to concentrate on it. So yeah, advertising, marketing on the Knot and Wedding Wire was one thing, but you guys really delved in deep on networking and networking inside of your niche. Can you talk a little bit about that and your strategy and kind of like how someone kind of same thing?
Yeah, I think honestly it was more upfront that the networking happened. So I guess networking could mean a few things. And in weddings, there's one sense in which we use quote unquote networking to advertise ourselves that's different from maybe the typical, I'm going to go to networking events.
Yeah.
Because that's something that we've tried over the years, but really didn't work out for us. But the good thing about weddings is when you're at the wedding, you're able to network with planners, with photographers, and obviously the bride and groom, you want to interact really well with them too, because those are three people who get asked, do you know any videographers that we could work with? And we care about people too and being kind and everything like that. We want to do a good craft. So I think hopefully we're an easy sell networking wise to be like, yeah, you want to work with us again. And so that's always been really important to us and something that we still emphasize today. If anybody doesn't really get that through their head, we try to make sure that it does get through their head. But
So what you guys do, right, your quality of wedding video, which you're more on the higher end, what things did you guys do that you felt like, hey, these are the things that we feel like is going to give the biggest value to our customers? Like when I would think about is like consistency. Oh, when they communicate with us, they're getting very good, consistent communication. What are some things that you built into your business that just made you, because I feel like in the arts, specifically your niche, there's a lot of people who are unbelievable artists. They're not good business people. Mm-hmm. So what did you guys do on the business side that really brought professionalism and helped to kind of build your brand?
More than anything, it was the way that we hired. We hired more based on personality than on skill. And actually, we never hired only based on skill, ever. Yeah. At least personally, whenever I was doing the hires, we never did that. I think there's been some maybe hires or contractors we've worked with over time that didn't quite meet the standard that we would have wanted, and that's something that we've corrected since then. But definitely, I think hiring, at least for our company, and I would guess for most companies, is just the most important part of your entire company, because it's the people that you're working with. It's, are they going to stick around? Are they going to be a good face for your business? Because in weddings, they're out interacting with your network. They're doing the network every single wedding. So they're basically salespeople. Yeah. In some sense. That are out there, and they have to be great with people.
Because that is your brand. Like, oh, these are our Old North people here doing this like function of job. And you're right, it is a tight niche. Like probably a lot of the photographers, you're at the same like place with them like all the time. Like, oh, and they would probably tell you of like, hey, this is not a best person for your brand. Mm-hmm. But you said something specifically. You almost never hired strictly on someone's talent. I can like relate with that. Is that can honestly be a double-edged sword sometimes, because a lot of times people who are very talented, they can't take criticism. Mm-hmm. Because that might not be in your style. Mm-hmm. But can you talk a little bit about that and how like that is something you're looking for, like specifically why talent wasn't like the driving force?
Yeah, I think that they had to have a level of talent, and I think something we were good at is being able to see, okay, based on the work that you have, do we think that we can help you get to the skill place that you need to be able to be to meet our quality, meet or exceed our quality? And but most importantly, what are you like as a person? Yeah. And, like in our interviews, it wasn't, hey, give me this long list of places you've worked for and let me call your references and see if they liked your work or anything like that. It was just, tell me what are some of your favorite movies and what do you like to do, and just trying to get to know them, see how they interacted with us face to face. And you can get a sense that way too of if someone feels like they're going to be a hard worker as well. If they're going to interact with their coworkers in a way that benefits the company. And in weddings, like you said, I mean, it's such a particularly people-based industry.
Yeah.
You don't even only need to know how to interact with people, but on the shooting side, you need to know what's important to people at their wedding. On the editing side, you need to know, oh, this thing that this father of the bride said is going to be great. It's going to really hit on people's emotions. And it affects every part of storytelling, really, your personality does.
So hiring, fully agree with that. I think especially in the niche you're in and it being very, very much like referral based, like people liking you and liking the people you work with. So go forward, you went through this period of time where you had an ownership change. Can you talk a little bit about that and maybe some of the difficulties that were in that? Because you guys were still kind of in the beginning stages when that happened.
Yeah, now I think it was actually now in the first half of our company. So there's been more time since then than before then. But it was really interesting how that happened.
Yeah.
Our company was across the hall from a 3D rendering company, and one of the owners of that company, he kind of took us on as by mentoring us. He was just a really, really knowledgeable, very well educated, very successful business person who does business consulting. I mean, and for free, and just because he was being a good friend, really. Gave us a lot of advice about what we should do and understood our end goal of wanting to get to where we can work on feature films. And so he pointed out, and this is something Tyler had been saying for a while in so many words, but it became clearest to me when this business friend of ours talked about it. I remember he was like drawing up on a whiteboard of like why this should happen, is that our money is not coming from our commercial or corporate side. So I didn't talk about that, but during all of this wedding stuff, we were also doing corporate video. So like talking heads with B-roll, footage of whatever it is. We did some videos for some breweries. We did all sorts of videos for different companies, even a commercial, some social media type stuff. And so that stuff was some of it was a lot more artistically gratifying to work on versus doing a wedding every single weekend, which some people enjoy a lot. But as far as for myself, for Tyler, and for Brandon, that wasn't something that we particularly enjoyed. And so what became clear from our friend across the hall was that for us to open up the most time for ourselves to be able to work on film, we needed to kind of follow the money, which for us was weddings. And so he pointed out a variety of ways that we could really build the company into something where we were doing hundreds of weddings a year and having a team that's able to manage and not have to require so much out of us that we can never step away at all to work on other things.
Yeah, the ability to simplify then scale.
Yeah.
What you were really good at.
Exactly, to scale. And so that decision, though, it clashed with, at the time, what was important and what I think you're going to have Brandon on your show, actually, with what he does now, which is not creative anymore in the same sense. But for Brandon, that wasn't something that he wanted to do or felt passionate about, and he understood our reasoning for that. It was very collaborative discussion, and in no way were we like, okay, you have to leave or anything like that. But it was like the company needs to go in this direction.
Yeah.
And so Brandon decided, okay, like I see that. I understand that. That's not for me, though, so I'm going to do, and at the time he was doing full-time cinematography, commercial cinematography. And so there was no bad blood there. I mean, Brandon's my neighbor now, and there's no offense between us.
And I want to talk a little bit about that because obviously, we've been close really since we were 1 and 2 years old, and our families have been close. And one thing I would say that is maybe one of your best gifts is you're just an unbelievably reasonable person. And that in business is like a very, very important thing, because there's people who are, you would say, like shrewd, or they are, they're good at putting deals together or something. But I feel like one thing you are the best at is you can work with just about anybody. And then you also can be like, hey, this isn't working out. And you also don't have bad blood. I feel like I can think of very few people that would say they have bad blood with you in general. And I think that is kind of like not something that's preached very often in business. Actually, one thing I really appreciate about my business partner, he's just an extremely reasonable person. Like if you have like, hey, I think we should do this, or I don't agree with you, it isn't like, oh, you're questioning you're not hurting my pride. It's like, okay, like let's work through it. Let's come to a consensus. I think you're really good at that. I think that's important for business too. So
yeah, no, I mean, I think it's huge. And I think one of the interesting things is people maybe watching this podcast to think about how can I be a bit better business owner. But I also think that a lot of that is because that's just important to me as a human being. It's not that I necessarily am like, this will make my company work so much better. It's like, no, I care. I care about people genuinely. And so I guess the only reason I say that is because a lot of times we can look at some of these qualities that are helpful for business that also happen to be good human qualities, good spiritual qualities. And so we can try to hijack those and take advantage of them to grow our business. But it's so much more important to care about what's going on in your own heart and your own life. And if that affects business in a good way, great. There's other ways that I view life and you can, well, I guess I'll say this. There's a lot of other ways that as you follow Jesus, they do clash with what finding a higher and higher level of success might look like in different industries.
Yeah, I think too, when you're reasonable, that might mean I think like the saying goes, like the good guys finish last. I don't think I agree with that. I think the good guys maybe lose opportunities sometimes.
They finish third.
Yeah, they finish third. But yeah, I think more of when people even if something didn't work out, when people know that you are reasonable, they want to work with you. And that might mean you miss out on an opportunity here and there that you weren't aggressive to go after or you weren't assertive in. But I think in the long run, people like really want to work with you. And I feel like being in business almost 12 years, like I've gotten to see a lot of that too, of like, oh, we didn't work with each other this time around. But then 5 years later, it's like, hey, I remember talking with you and we had a great conversation. Like, here's an opportunity. And it's just funny how you just even almost forget about those conversations where nothing really came of it. But because because you're loving towards other people and genuine with other people, they want to work with you. I think that's a winning quality long term.
Yeah.
So, if year 3, you shot, I think, 55 weddings about. Let's just kind of, because that business stayed pretty similar until now. How many weddings do you think you're going to shoot in 2023?
This year we'll probably do 300 is my guess.
That's like a great average growth per year.
It is. So when we made this decision to focus on weddings, it actually came on the tail end of experiencing just a plateau in growth, because we did, like I said, 55 weddings, and the next year we did, I believe, 54 weddings.
Yeah.
And I think we had raised the prices a tiny bit, so there was still some growth. But like you mentioned before about having to drive, Tyler having to drive Uber and Lyft for a little while, there was a time where in the winter we weren't getting the sales that we needed, and so we wanted to keep our employees on and make sure that they got paid, and so all the owners started taking pay cuts and just said, okay, well, until we get back to the wedding season, we're not going to make any money. So we had 2 years that were like that. And so that decision where, okay, well, let's focus all on our weddings.
Yeah.
What we did is we poured into advertising. We started advertising in the top highest spots on the Knot, the highest spots on Wedding Wire. I won't go into all the different websites and different ways, but we did start going to some like networking events and stuff like that. And we really increased our emphasis on everyone that's going to weddings with us really interacting well, especially with the photographers and the videographers, because so many and the planners, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Because so many videographers are just awful to work with. And if we've ever had anyone that we've heard that someone had a bad experience, like we just take that as seriously as you can take it. I mean, we've stopped working with people. We've given people like hey, here's everything that was said, and that better change immediately, or else we can't work together again, because it's our highest thing. And so anyway, at that time we put focus on that. We started advertising, and we went from 54 weddings to the very next year we shot, I believe, 115 or something like that. So we did not expect to grow that much that fast. And it was so huge because Tyler and I, neither of us have some super high standard that we want to live at.
Yeah.
In fact, the way that Julia and I are living our lives is that we have a base level that we've set as far as the amount of money that we want to live on.
Yeah.
And then we personally have decided that above that, we give that money away.
Yeah.
And so because of that, once we hit that low bar, we were able to say, okay, well, I don't need to keep working harder and harder and more. Instead, right now, we can place the people in our company into positions that are able to do a significant amount of the important work while giving them raises and everything that's indicative of that and reflects that additional work. But just being able to form the company into something that it needs to be without saying, okay, well, if I didn't step out, though, I could make another $60,000 because that doesn't matter to me. That's not the goal of the company. The goal is to be able to do film.
Yeah.
So if I can pay someone, $65,000 to do a job that would take me 30 hours, then I just gained 30 hours, and I didn't need to make $150,000.
Yeah. And that's kind of going back to your mission, right? Of like, we did this to do film. Mm-hmm. So kind of getting to that point, you start, you hire some more people, you're paying them more to take on more of the administration jobs that you and Tyler are doing. When do you guys start working on your film?
So it wasn't too far into our business before we started giving little chunks into film. Yeah. What that looked like up front was doing screenwriting. And so we would spend a little bit of time each week on that. And then I would say that first year that we shot, 115 weddings, things started to open up a decent amount, where I was writing a lot. I wrote multiple screenplays before we actually came to a place where we're like, okay, we have a lot of time now compared to what we had before. So Tyler and I, and this was after Brandon had moved on, but Tyler and I were working pretty frequently and a lot of hours on writing a screenplay together that we planned to produce. And so that started like 5 years ago.
Yeah, because your kind of first kind of push into your first screenplay, how long did it take from the time you really started the concept of that screenplay to like being like, okay, this is a finished product? How long was that?
That was like 5 years.
Yeah. I remember, because I remember I would like show up and you and Tyler would be like, oh yeah, like you were like working through a lot of like the concepts and stuff.
And there were a lot of versions of that script that could have been shot and would have been passable, but we wanted to make something really great. And and it's not like we were working on it 40 hours a week.
Yeah. No.
So we would take breaks. We work on stuff with the company and then come back to it, and that causes things to have to stall for a while. So it's not like we worked 5 years, 40 hours a week on this screenplay. But yeah, we worked on it for a long time.
Yeah. So you go through the process, you're writing the screenplay, you get it done. Can you walk through, number one, kind of how you thought things would go at that point, and then maybe some things that like, oh, this was kind of, maybe some things you thought like, oh, this met my expectation of how hard it would be, and then things were like, oh, this is like way harder, and like what's been the hardest thing so far in this process of getting this film made?
Yeah. So there's been a lot more stuff that has kind of happened in the company that have led up to this exact point. Mm-hmm. And at this point, I have the freedom myself to be spending my full time working on this film. I do still do stuff with Tyler's working on the company, or on the wedding side of stuff full time, and so I still have input there, and he and I meet about different things. But the high majority of my time right now is trying to get this film produced, and so that process has been very. There's been a steep learning curve. There's been, it seems like every week my eyes are opened to a new reality of what this is like, and all the while feeling like, is the segment of independent filmmaking that I'm kind of getting into, the people I'm meeting, the people I'm working with, is that the segment that I should even be in right now? You know, I'm constantly trying to just understand, what does Hollywood look like? What does this segment of Hollywood look like? What's my place in it? What's this screenplay's place in it? And so, yeah, it's been a lot of networking, reaching out, emailing people, bringing on some producers that have worked on higher quality stuff with A-list actors. We're working with a production company that, you know, they do 50 films a year. They've worked with, tons of people that you could name: John Travolta, Bruce Willis, you know, Mel Gibson, all those, that level of people. And so they're working with us on getting this produced, and it seems like it's very much just a networking game, I guess, similar to weddings. Of if you get in with the right planner in the wedding industry, you're gold. You know, if you get in with the right producer, you're gold. So
yeah, it almost seems like you're in a car and you only have a gallon of gas in it, and then you drive, you run out of gas, and then you wait, and then, oh, I got enough money to buy another gallon of gas. Then you go, and it's like really just kind of like a lot of waiting, and a lot of like, not in like the way of like money, but in a way of like pinching. Okay, like, oh, maybe there's an opportunity here, and it's like it's like you have like 8 fishing lines in the water. You're just waiting, and you don't know when it's gonna happen.
Yeah. Yeah, it's kind of like you're cold calling. It's like you're called 200 people today kind of job. But we've had a lot of great conversations. We've talked to some well-established producers. And like I said, I think the team that we have together right now is really good. We're getting a few things finalized with the script, funnily enough. But funnily, is that a word?
Funnily, I mean, maybe it sounds like it sounds like a word I would use. Okay. So probably not then. So one thing specifically I want you to explain, because I feel like I understand it now, but I had no idea how film investing worked, right? And there's 2 different kinds. I want you to kind of explain that, because I think it's really interesting, and I actually think it's a decent vehicle, especially with how the market is right now with stocks and stuff, for people to make a decent return on their money. But I think it's a really unique, like financial like vehicle to make money. Can you kind of explain how that works?
I can do my best. So it's interesting because I'm not in any way an expert. I'm just sharing what I've learned over the past 6 months, which is what I've been spending all my time on. There's been a lot of conversations with people who have made independent films with high-profile actors. So it's the people that I'm talking to have done it, and so the knowledge that I've gained, I think, is legitimate. But I could see me telling this to a different experienced producer and then being like, no, that's not how it is. And then they launch into how they think it is. So, but to just share what I've kind of gained and learned so far, sort of what our
worst case scenario, someone's going to tell you you're wrong and you learn, right?
Right.
Yeah, there you go.
Sort of what our strategy is that the most important thing is to attach an actor to your film. That's, from a financial standpoint, that's basically all that matters. And one of the things that we've tried to do, and this is based on the fact that we were working with a producer who has worked with a really big name actor who he was familiar with. If you get this actor on board and it's in this genre, this is how much you can get in pre-sales for the film. So what that is where a film distributor, which that's someone who takes the film, they sell it to different territories.
Mm-hmm.
Sold this one in China, sold this one in these different countries in Europe, or they distribute it here in the United States. You can find distributors that will say, oh, you have, and this is not who it was, but just as someone everyone will know that's even far higher profile than we would be able to work with. But let's say we have Leonardo DiCaprio in our movie. I know that it's going to make this much in this country and this much in this country. So I, being the distributor, will give you a pre-sale deal, which is where I will say, if you make this film, I guarantee you that you're going to get this much money. There's a contract.
Yeah, so the distributors get more of the upside, but then you're getting a guaranteed amount to go make the film, basically.
Yeah, and as far as how stuff works with big budget, so it's funny that I say Leo because he's only working on big budget stuff. Yeah. So this doesn't happen with him.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know how that world works. I'm only talking in the $1 to $6 million film range.
So can I give you an example just to put it into a normal product base? So imagine, and tell me if I'm wrong in understanding this. So imagine that I am a watchmaker and I make a watch, and you're a company that distributes watches, and the distributor is like, hey, I like your watch, but I will only buy in bulk of your watch if you have it attached to a supermodel. I mean, our Kardashian or something.
Mm-hmm.
So basically, then what you have to do is, okay, then you have to be like, okay, how do I get Kardashian to put my watch on and be a sponsor of it?
Yeah.
An influencer for it. It's like, oh, I need $1 million. So then you go to people like, hey, I need $1 million to get them to sponsor this. So the distributor will buy 100,000 of these, and then you get your return back. Is that kind of how it works?
Yeah,
in a very simple way.
There's an additional step though, and it's like the person who funds based on the pre-sale. So, which I guess that would kind of be the investor, if that's what you're already saying. But I guess I'm getting a little bit wrapped up here because we had talked about this other kind of strange way of financing that I didn't go into yet.
Yeah.
But what that is, and why I said there's this other, is that you also need, with high-profile actors, like you're saying, with Kardashians, you need the money to be able to get them. I'm kind of getting all caught up, so I know we're going to cut some of this.
Yeah, that's fine.
Help me understand what you're
So
asking.
what I'm saying is, you are going to need a distributor at some point to be able to distribute your film. Like, they're the ones who buy it, and then you still have some of the upside, but they are getting more of the upside because they're taking the risk, right? And you have initial investors that are saying, hey, we are only investing in essentially what they're doing is they're putting money into a briefcase so that you can show it to Mrs. Kim Kardashian. You'd be like, hey, look at all this money we have to have you sponsor this watch. She's like, okay, I'll sign a contract. If this is picked up by distribution, I will sponsor your watch for that amount of money. It's almost like earnest money. It's almost like showing like, hey, we are serious, because I'm sure these big range actors, they get requests all the time to be in stuff.
Right.
So essentially, the first part is you need people to help put money in the briefcase to show, hey, we are serious. We do have people who will back this. But then once distribution picks up the deal, those people will put the money, they have the chance to get their money back plus 10%.
Yeah, that's an example agreement that there might be. Yeah, and that's something that we had pursued, which was in a very specific example, being like, we want to make a offer to, I'm trying to think of a different actor to use, John Travolta. It's not one of us, but we want to make an offer to John Travolta, but in order for them to even look at that offer, to look at the script, they need to see, okay, you've got $3 million in an account ready to escrow to us. Yeah. And so you say, here it is. Here's the offer. If you accept this film, we will escrow all the money into your account within 2 weeks. And so then once they accept, then you take John Travolta's letter of intent. Yeah. You take it to the distributor. You say, hey, we got John Travolta on. Here's the genre. And they say, yes, here's the pre-sale for $6 million. So now you have John Travolta for $6 million, plus you have $3 million to make your movie. Yeah. With the other actors you need and all of the crew and locations and everything it takes to make a movie. So that's one way. I think what's more common, much more common from what I've gathered so far, is that you reach out to actors who are maybe not as high profile as like John Travolta, but who may be willing to look at your script based on who you're working with. So, for example, we're working with this production company, and they have relationships with all of these agents. So the agents know, okay, this production company is coming to us again with a film. Worked out great for my other client, John Travolta. Now they want Dane DeHaan or someone like that, and so then because you have those, then those actors are willing to actually take a look at your script and know, okay, they're making me an offer. It's a real offer, even though the offer isn't saying, hey, look, we have $3 million set aside for you. And so then once you get a letter of intent from those people, you can take those LOIs and present them to other companies for pre-sales. You can do that, and that does happen.
Yeah.
But now it's much more likely that you'll go to an investor and you'll show this film has this number of people, and it's much more like a business plan. Yeah. They're taking a risk investment, but it's not a high risk investment like as if I just said, hey, I'm going to make a movie. Give me $3 million. It's got no names in it, but it's going to be really good. That happens where a really good movie happens with no good actors, but it's so rare. It's not even worth talking about.
So you go through this process, and then you have the second screenplay that you feel like is more palatable. Where are you kind of in the process, and then what are kind of the next steps to get that done?
Yeah, so right now, the company that we're working with, the production company, they highly recommend that you submit your script to this website called Slated.
Yeah.
And they essentially give a score to your screenplay. So they look at all these different things, logic, conflict, character, dialogue, craft, all these different things. Yeah. And there's 3 different readers who score those. And so you get an overall script score. And if you score really well on it, you can actually have your screenplay get looked at by, they have like a big network of investors who will look at screenplays that score a certain level of quality. And so one of the goals is to hopefully get into that category and that high of a score. But the other one is just to make sure you understand your story really well, that you're really happy with it, because they give you incredibly detailed notes, like 10 pages of notes of like, okay, this is how your conflict was in your script, and here's the things that like didn't work out well. They don't do a lot of like, you should do this, but it's really helpful to see, oh, all 3 readers felt this same thing. And every once in a while, 2 readers will like love something, and then one of them's like, this didn't work at all, and that's like super frustrating. Yeah. It's like, okay, you didn't get it. So that's one reason. That's the other reason is to just make sure you're really happy with the quality. And then from there, once we have the script fully locked, because they just want to make sure that I'm not going to like want to make any big changes in the future and that we're all good before we start like reaching out to these different actors. So then once that's done, which right now we're just doing a second round because we got the score back. It scored really well, but a lot of the things that they pointed out, I wanted to make some additional changes, and I think it'll score even better and hopefully open us up to some of their higher level investors. But once that's done, then the company that we're working with, who has all the relationships with these talent agencies and managers, then they are going to reach out to the different actors that we would like for the different parts. And then if you don't hear back from them within a week, you reach out again, and then you wait several days. And then if you don't hear back again, then you can reach out to the next person. Yeah. But you don't want to like be like, here's 20 actors that I'm interested in, and then just like blast them all with like emails being like, is this person available? Because you'll get like blacklisted is what I've done.
Yeah, it seems like you get to like handle that with like pretty gentle hands of like, all right, slowly getting in and like see, and then slowly kind of widening like your casting. So yeah. So really excited to see this get done. If you were to say a percentage of the chance that this thing is made and we will see it maybe on Amazon's, like that was another question I had. Sorry. Because it feels like Amazon, Netflix, Hulu, I guess that's Disney. Is that very common kind of for this kind of like film? Like, oh, hey, maybe it didn't have all it needed to make it to theaters, but it's bought up by like these other companies?
Super normal. Yeah. Especially for this level of film, you're not looking at much theatrical distribution. Yeah. It's these distributors selling in territories all over the world based on names. And DVD sales are still huge, especially around the world. Blu-ray and all that kind of stuff, but also streaming on different platforms.
Well, it does seem too like the play is actually in the residual. Like I feel like it's almost like the opposite. Like when you look at like a film, it's like, oh, like had a big like a Transformers is like had a huge box office. We make all this money. We made our money back in the first 6 months. But it seems more like this film is like actually more of the longevity of it. Is like, hey, you might, and like correct me if I'm wrong, but you might spend $4 million to get it done. In the first year, you only make like 500,000, but then you make 500,000 for like 5 or 6 straight years. Is that how that kind of works when it goes out to distribution channels like that?
No, it's very heavily front loaded.
Oh, it is? Okay.
Yeah, it's like this, like a curve like this. Yeah. There'll be some with like Sound of Music. It's like, that's one of the most profitable movies of all time in theaters. So that was the biggest up front, but then it's like today it still makes tons of money.
Yeah.
So no, Amazon is one that's like you can self-distribute on Amazon. You can put your film up there as long as it doesn't like break their content policy. You can be up there and then you advertise it yourself through social media. You can go a fully independent route like that. And if you have actors, you can find some success, especially if you're a business owner, I think, like me, who's used to doing marketing and understanding how to market to specific groups. I think that we might be able to find success if I was just trying to go it on my own. But no, a lot of films now have deals with Netflix. Hulu. Amazon will buy films, but I'm not sure exactly what that looks like since you're just able to put your film on Amazon. I guess it's...
Yeah, I'm sure it's probably different, right? They might be like, hey, we just want to buy all the rights, so we have all the upside, and then you maybe you don't get anything after that. I just don't know how that business works at all.
If they buy it forever, then they could just buy it forever.
Yeah.
That's really not usually an ideal situation. But if okay, this is a good film, but it's not going to become crazy huge suddenly.
I think it's like anything else with any investment you have. It's kind of like, hey, I'm going to take the money, or if you need the money, you take the money. Hey, I'm going to sell all the rights to it because I need money to make my next project, and or you can get a loan on that. But man, I'm really excited. I'm confident you're going to get there, and hopefully, a year and a half from now, we can talk about how well the movie did. And,
a year and a half would be quick. We'll see. We'll see. It really just depends on once we get somebody attached, because you got got to get the right timing too. Some actors, when you get to levels that are below George Clooney,
Yeah.
actors are still looking to work, to make money. I mean, a lot of them love acting, and as long as they can tell that your movie is not going to be absolutely horrendous,
Like,
and sometimes even if it's, like Nick Cage had that span of time where he was making terrible movies, but he's famous. That just happens. You can hit people at the right time and everything like that. And I've been very curious to learn about this too, because I don't have delusions of grandeur. There's, like you asked me before, you're like, is there a percentage that this is actually going to happen? I don't know what that is. I feel confident that it's what I'm supposed to be doing, so I'm going to do it. And I think that if it ends up having to be through a route that does not involve the ability to do a film that's, I think our budget right now is like $1.8 million for this one, including getting the profile actors that we want, then I'll find a way to finance it and make it myself.
Yeah. I think that's the biggest thing too. You talked about it. You live in such a way where you don't personally need much.
Right.
So the company that you've built that is very successful and does well was you built it to do exactly what it's to help kind of have that seed money to do these projects, which I really respect. I really respect your business ownership, and honestly as a friend, and then also as a leader for our community and the people who have worked with you. So I appreciate it.
Thank you very much.
All right.